We are live. Hello and welcome to the Reintroduction Podcast. Father Elijah, I'm sick of these introductions. Like it sounds just I'm so tired of. Hi, I'm your host, Mina Suiris. I'm with my co-host, Father Elijah Stefanos. I hope you know who we are by now, and if you don't, then at least be excited because today we got Kathy Tedros, our dear friend from a long time and a long history of service and friendship. So that's what you should be excited about. Not Mina Suiris, but maybe also you should be excited about Father Elijah Stefanos because we like him. Kathy Tedros is, go ahead, Father.
He's very mediocre, Father Elijah. We should be very excited about
sometimes
Dr. Kathy Tedros. That's who we should be excited about.
Absolutely. Kathy's a great friend, long-time friend. I've known Kathy, I would say, for going on to maybe 10 years now.
Yeah.
She is a psychiatrist by profession. So we're very excited to hear her personal and professional insights today. She's married to a great friend of ours as well, Father Samuel, and they currently both serve in Virginia, which happens to be Kathy's home state before she moved to New Jersey. So Kathy, we're so excited to have you on today for such a great topic, for you to share your insights and we can learn from you. We're so happy you're here.
Thank you for having me. I'm humbled. I'm star-stricken, number one, because I'm on the Reintroduction Podcast.
Right.
But I definitely feel like I have imposter syndrome. Like I do not belong here at all.
Well, I'm glad you feel that way because that's how we feel every single episode.
I still get butterflies in my stomach and get nervous before we go live every time. So it's
really
just a you thing.
We're so excited that you're here, Kathy, and thank you for accepting our invitation to really just have a conversation among friends, but on the record. That's really the only difference. If you've been listening to us, anyone who's listening, we've talked about, we have kind of the theme this season is about authenticity. We talked about what it means to be an authentic individual, an authentic Christian. And the conversation naturally led to when you talk about how you can go back to the basics and be raw and be vulnerable as an individual, because that's how God intended for you to be restored. Naturally, the conversation flows into, okay, what about the environment and the atmosphere that you're supposed to do that in? Are you supposed to do that in a vacuum? Are you supposed to do that by yourself? Or are you supposed to do that within a community? And if it is a community, what does that really look like? So we wanted to have this conversation with you today about what it means to be an authentic community, to be part of it, to be changed by it, and to impact it. And because it's something that permeates who we are, and we talk about it maybe not commonly enough, but at least as an idea, it's there because a lot of people have been beneficiaries of community, and a lot of people have been hurt by community. So it's an amazing topic, an amazing part of who we are. So I wanted to bring you on today to have a discussion about what it really means to be an authentic community, and to really reflect on that. We could say, does God really care if you're part of a community, or are you doing things kind of on your own, especially in a society that constantly highlights the importance of individualism and to be you and to do you? How does God view community for the rest of us, for all of us? What do you think? I threw a lot on you already.
Is this directed at me?
What do you think, Kathy?
I do think we are meant to be in communion. I think, since the start, he created Adam, and then he said it was not good for man to be alone. So, the being individual, being authentic, being yourself, being true to yourself, being unique, all these things are important, but it's not to separate us from the fellowship that God intended for his people. And I couldn't agree with you more that sometimes that community can be the cause of hurt and pain and traumatic experiences that kind of push people to isolate alone. But it could also be something that's really healthy and holds you accountable and helps you build one another up. I think if the people that know me the most will probably say I always harp on the village. Your village is so important, and who's in your village is even more important. And this idea of just encouraging one another and building one another up and is a dynamic that can only come from fellowship with God's people, not in an isolated bubble. I don't foresee that. But what are your thoughts of them?
Oh man. I think there's a lot there. I think for certain, we are not meant to be alone. And I think COVID proved that. Yes. I think you see this in your clinical practice. When I was still treating, I saw it a bunch in my patients. I remember when patients would come in to see me, they would explode talking because they just were so eager to talk to somebody because they've been sitting by themselves and watching TV. It was just and you're like, oh, slow down. There's definitely this essential element that we need each other. And I think when we are alone, there is a lot of stuff that comes out. And we're afraid to be alone, but there's a benefit of being alone, and there's a negative from being alone for too long. Yes. And when you're alone for too long, and you have no one to interact with, I think it can have some major ramifications on you. And I think even when you think about this, right, what makes a person is that they have somebody to interact with, right? I only know that I'm funny when I have somebody to tell a joke to. I only know that I am, compassionate if I have somebody to be compassionate towards. So I think there's the crux of it is for certain, we need other people. Now, what you alluded to about the toxicity that sometimes comes from people, and the drama that gets developed with being in relationship with other people, the messiness of it is what sometimes complicates and hinders people from being in relationship. So I understand the fear that sometimes people have. Is I've been in a relationship and I've been burned, and it's better for me not to be in community. It's better for me to isolate. It's better for me by myself. Me and my dog, or me and my cat, we're good. We don't need anyone else. Right. But I don't know. What do you think, Kathy? I'll bring it back to Mina in a second. What do you think psychologically you've seen as a result of people isolating or people not being in community, and the ramifications of that?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think timing and context is absolutely important. Through COVID, we started hearing this concept of social distancing instead of physical distancing, which is really what we needed to do, is physically distance ourselves. But we started this idea of socially distancing being okay, that when we saw a return to the community, it was almost overwhelming stimulus to people. They couldn't be outside for too long. They couldn't be around others for too long. They wanted to come back inside and withdraw. And during COVID, a lot of my, shy patients, my, introverts loved it. They enjoyed being alone throughout the entire time. Extroverts hated it. But what we saw is even the extroverts returning to the world were running out of energy quickly being around people, and needed this concept of, I need some quiet time to myself. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If I don't start my day or implement some time in my day where I need just time to myself, time with God, restore, replenish, I am not my best, right? But to continue that for a long period of time where I'm not socializing with anyone or having anyone hold me accountable for my actions or checking in on me on what I'm doing or my spiritual life, that can be detrimental for a long period of time. Just like being in community only and not having that one-on-one time with God or quiet time can be detrimental on your mental health as well, I think, over time. So I think balance is definitely key. And what that looks like to each individual person is going to be different. So I don't think it's like a cookie cutter recipe that I can give anyone. But knowing yourself and being true to yourself and your needs, I think, is important.
What do you think?
That's, yeah, that's a great point. I'm gonna bring it back to something you said at the very beginning, Kathy. When I asked you if you think it matters to God if we are in community, the first thing that you said was God created us to be in communion. So yeah, so is that different from community? Being in communion different from being community? Is that like, are you talking about like a Sunday brunch after church? Or are you talking about just like a random phone call here and there? Or like, what is the difference between, again, because since we're talking within the Christian umbrella and within Christian understanding, Orthodox Christian understanding, then what is the view of the Christian communion that individuals can partake in that is different from just like a casual community event? Or is it different? Because it might not be. Is it different to begin with?
I do love this question.
Choice of words.
I do love this question because I feel like in the church community, it sets up everything for us that we don't really have to go outside almost. Like there's the sports, there's the Sunday school, there's all these services, there's different boards and panels you can be a part of. And it's almost like it's running its own little city inside within the church structure. But when you're in the community within your own city, it's almost like God is here and this is where I do my public service. And I don't know that any of it is different. I just think being true to yourself is really important, and not being true to yourself is like, oh, do whatever makes you happy kind of attitude. But like who did being true to yourself in the sense that I have to be honest with who I am, what my personality is, my likes, my dislikes, what provokes me, what doesn't provoke me, what can turn me away from God, all those little strengths and weaknesses about myself. Because the more honest I am about myself, the more that I see the more honest I am about myself, the more I can be who God created me to be, to do what it is that he created me to do. But if I'm sitting here and taking direction from everyone else in the community, then I lose who I am and his purpose for me. He cannot use me to be you, right? If I'm trying to aim to be more like you, then I lose my sense of purpose and well-being. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but I really think I forgot the question. So remind me if I went in a different direction with that. Because
no, totally.
It could be elsewhere.
It's actually, it's right on. So let me summarize what you're saying. So what you're saying is, God within a Christian community, within the sense of Christian community, God is shaping you to be like him, and it's not really like everyone else. And that's kind of what one of the starkest differences in a way between what is the goal of a Christian community or the communion that you have as Christians, as opposed to just like, just an outing that doesn't have God in the epicenter of it, is that God is almost shaping you, or calling you to be like him, but he's inviting you to do that not individually. He's inviting you to do that within a community, because that community is supposed to somehow benefit from you as an individual, and you are supposed to somehow benefit from that community as a shelter and an umbrella, to cater that environment, the atmosphere, the ecosystem where all this could happen.
Absolutely.
Is that right?
Yes. You kind of get your fill from your community, your Christian community, but do you just leave it there, or shouldn't you take that out to the world? You have something so great. Shouldn't you share that? Shouldn't you spread that? And I feel a lot of us kind of stick within our safety bubble and what we're our comfort zone, that we're afraid to go out and do more than that. This is kind of where my line is sometimes. But I think it's an opportunity to bring him wherever we go, but we have to come back and get our fill from that community.
Because you started answering this question by saying we are a city within a city, and we
Yeah.
are self-sustaining, but I guess you mean it not in a particularly great way. Like it's not, it might be good because it fills and it gives, but it's not good when it only gives itself,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So, yeah, Father Elijah, what do you think about that?
Man, I have so many feelings. There's like so many things that I want to say in this moment. I'm trying to like sort of be,
Maybe we shouldn't go live.
I mean,
Too late for that.
Let's
too late for
redo
that,
this.
Cass.
Let's
Let's stop and,
reintroduce.
let's reintroduce this whole subject. No, the city within the city is a beautiful thing, right? The fact that this is a safe haven, like this is an ark within a storm, and this ark is able to protect you from the storms around you, and it's a place where you can find safety and haven and protection. And if it's really the ark which people are supposed to be safe in the midst of the flood of the world around them, then that ark should continue to welcome people in it in order for them also to find safety. And I think the problem is there's so many facets here, right? Like when you have your little city within the city and you get really comfortable within the city, why bring somebody into it? It's working. Like, why mess with it? Like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right.
But there's a difference between it being like a social club versus it being a church, like the eternal body of Christ, right? And an authentic Christian community needs to always have its arms open to extend out to others. When it becomes insular and when it becomes exclusive, it's no longer the intention of what God designed the church to be. And I think that's a big struggle, because even when you think about that, try to be particular with my words here. And the reason why I'm trying to be particular is because there is definitely a benefit from people coming with like-minded people and being together and growing together in community. But there's a big, big blind spot there too. Like we have people, I don't know about you, Kathy, you and Abuna's church in Virginia, like in Richmond. We have people every single week showing up to the doorsteps of our church that are non-Egyptians. And when they enter into our community is very, very open-minded, like very welcoming, but there is like a whole microcosm within this, like, and it's like, woof, like people immediately, they're like, I don't know if I fit in here. Like
Right.
there is like this whole subculture within the culture and nuance and things that I need to understand. And I'm taking us in
Abuna, I don't know if I belong.
yeah.
Like, to be quite honest, like there is this cultural piece that you can't ignore. It's like the elephant in the room. If you try to ignore it, you know. But I don't mean to cut you off, Abuna. I'm sorry, but I remember Abuna. Tedros once told us, you know, when you go out, you can't get people to become Coptic. They can't come in and become Egyptian, but they can be Orthodox. They can be Christian. And it's like you have to relate to them on that level. And just like St. Paul did, relate to people on all kinds of level. To the Romans, he was a Roman. But I do feel like this big cultural piece can kind of be a turnoff at times when people can't fit into the overall church.
Yeah. So it's like, what is authentic community? Is authentic community exclusive, or is authentic community inclusive? Like, is a real community that is centered in a Christian understanding and a Christian mindset supposed to be exclusive only to a select group of people that look a certain way, that speak a certain language, that have a certain cultural background. And not to say to remove culture. I think culture is a major part of like faith systems, but is that culture accessible, and does it enhance the spiritual experience of people entering into that community? I know many people that walk into our church that love the hymnology and love the culture of the
Yes.
church. But there is like a
Yes.
subculture that is not in liturgical worship. It's a subculture of like community.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
So I don't know.
I'm
Mina,
all
what,
about the culture.
I don't know if I took us on a tangent, but like this idea of like authentic community has to be like, because if a community ought to be loving, love can't be exclusive. Love by definition must be inclusive. So if love is exclusive, and if our community is supposed to be a loving community because God is love, and we aren't including others in our community, then I don't know if that's really authentic Christian community. And not to say that people within the community aren't trying, they're striving, but there's so much work from all of us to do. Like there's so much work even from me, like as a leader of a church, to create a culture within the community that fosters and welcomes every single person through its doors. I'm talking way too much, so I'm gonna stop there, and I'm gonna pass the mic to
I'm not taking a mic. So, but I mean, I love what you both are sharing in terms of where culture and where community meet, because so in a sense, you're both saying then that authentic community should not be grounded on culture. Like it should transcend culture. Like culture is an important element of it, but it is not the anchoring stone for it. And if you try to anchor an authentic Christian community just on culture, it will be by definition exclusive. So therefore undesirable from a Christian sense. And for non-Christian communities, people who try to do community outside of the church, they have to anchor. Part of the definition is that to develop a central piece to get people around, you have to find something in common. So it's got to be maybe like football on Sunday nights that can foster a spirit of community, but it only fosters a spirit of community for those who love football, not everyone else.
Right.
So it's not anchored on interests. It's not anchored on culture. It's not anchored on interests. Although you can foster some spirit of community anchored on these things. But for our discussion, in order to foster a spirit of community that is catering and accepting and inclusive of everyone who's coming to seek Christ, the only way to do it is to anchor it on Christ. Like that is the central piece. And from our understanding, it's the Orthodox, like how we've developed that understanding of who God is and how central Christ is to us being in community. And as you both were speaking, I can think of like the Formula One races, because essentially or specifically pit stops, because the pit stop is so crucial and is so like dynamic and is so fluid. There's so many different components, all the teams get together in order to get you in and out of that pit stop in like less than 5 seconds in order for you to race. Because the point of the pit stop is not to be in the pit stop the whole race. It is that community that is supposed to prepare you and get you ready and share and get together for one common goal, which is for you to get back out there and win the race. And in a sense, the church is the same thing. If you are only staying within the walls of the church and not leaving, then everything you're taking in, you're only taking it for yourself. And that does not foster the spirit of real community and outreach, and bringing people in and becoming inclusive. Right?
I love that.
So,
analogy.
yeah, it's just like, because, and what's beautiful about it is really how everyone knows their role, everyone knows their job,
Yes.
everyone fulfills their duty. And when they do fail, for the most part, they do not blame a specific person. They say, okay, as a team, we didn't execute, we didn't do this.
Right.
And that's a real spirit of community. It reminds me of a saying for Saint Francis of Assisi. Someone came to confession to confess something in particular, and Saint Francis said to him, "I'm going to fast with you because if you sinned, that means I also sinned." And that's like, that is a, I don't know if if I dare to say, it's a utopian idea of community, but it's not a utopian idea of communion. Like, it is very, that's the key difference. What you mentioned in the beginning, Kathy, is like, how do you do that? How do you execute that type of community within the community? That's like, how do you really do that? So then we can talk about what are the necessities, or what are the characteristics or the necessary sacrifices for a community in order to become that sort of utopian, in communion with God and with each other. What are the sacrifices necessary for something like that?
You got all that from me. I'm really shocked.
So no, say that again. I didn't hear you.
I said, if you summed up all that, and you got all that from me. That wasn't
Yeah.
me. That must be the Holy Spirit talking.
That was all you.
I don't recall saying any of that.
I read between the lines too.
You dug deep there.
Mina's really good
That is
at
all-
like recapping what people say. He's
He
excellent.
did.
No. No.
That was
But
impressive.
honestly, it is really like, it is the spirit of everything you've said, honestly. And that's why, and that's the part that becomes harder when it comes to execution. Okay, how do you get there? Okay, I want that. Okay, so if you want that, how do you plan on doing it? How do you plan on getting this done? Like, what does it require from the person, and what does it require from the community? You can choose to speak on whichever one you like.
I feel like, as a psychiatrist, we always say we can't change others. We can't change the world. There's only so much you have control over. You can only really have control over so much. And so I can only change what I have the power to control. And so if I want to change the world, I have to start with myself, and it's a ripple effect. So working on myself within that community is important, but working on myself and focusing on myself to be the best, that I can. And we're all sinners, and we all fall short, and we all try, get up and try again, right? It's like falling off a bicycle, but you have to keep getting up and trying again, right? But it's focusing on myself, and in essence, having that ripple effect on those around me as well. And then the community becomes better as a whole. I was going somewhere with this, but I completely forgot. So I'm going to give it to someone else for a second until I gather my thoughts again.
Okay.
Bringing it to the community.
I think
So-
even as you said, Kathy, the focusing on the self, there's a focus on the self that I need to better myself, but there's also a focus on less of myself.
Mhm.
Be an authentic community, meaning I want to focus on bettering myself, as you said, for sure. Like, I need to better myself to be the best version of myself in Christ for the sake of this community. Like, alluding to that St. Francis quote, there's a St. Justin quote, St. Justin Martyr, that says, when you sin, you affect your brother, like, because you're not your most authentic version of yourself. So you're impacting the person next to you because you're falling short of what God is calling you to be. But there's another part of authentic community that I'm like grappling with, and now, again, this new role in my life that God has called me to, which is, it's not actually about me. Which is like really hard to tell people, right? Like, when you come into a church, it's not about you. Like, even in Orthodox worship, everything is centered around Christ. Like, when you enter into a church, there's nobody facing you. It's all focused on the Pantocrator, like the God Almighty in the center of the priest is facing the altar. Like, everything is centered around him. It's not about you. And I think communities become unhealthy when it's about what pleases me and what satisfies
Right.
me. And if I'm working to be the best version of myself in Christ, the heart of Christ is self-forgetting in a way, and not self-forgetting in an unhealthy way where you're like, castrating yourself or something, or like, I'm talking about like the self-forgetting and like when I enter into a church, what can I give to this community versus what can I take from this community? I don't know if you read that,
Yeah.
like that 100-year study from Harvard about like the things that lead to happiness. And it's fascinating because, in summary of 100 years of studying human happiness, they figured out that the keys to living longer, healthier, happier lives is people in deep and meaningful relationships, people that live a life of gratitude, and people that serve others. So there's like 3 criteria. The deep and meaningful relationships are number 1, the life of gratitude is number 2, and the life of serving others. And I think the individualistic society has made community all about me. So people leave communities when the community isn't satisfying what they want, because I put myself at the center. So if I'm in the center and somebody isn't the best version of who God is calling them to be that day, and they lash out at me or they do something, oh, forget this community. It's filled with a bunch of hypocritical, judgmental people. I'm done with this. I'm out. Deuces,
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that's like so how do we work on ourselves in order to be less self-focused? That's like the better way to, I don't know, maybe from a psychiatrist perspective, you could tell us.
No, it's interesting that you said that study, because when patients come to see me, the first thing I prescribe is a gratitude list. The second thing I prescribe is a service of some sort, whether it's volunteering at an animal shelter or the hospital or what have you, but something to take the focus off of me and looking at how I can better serve others and those around me. Then we talk about medications lastly. But those I always tell them, it doesn't matter what medication we're going to put you on. If we're not practicing gratitude and we're not living a life of service, the brain will always be warped into depressive thinking, because you always see the world as a negative place. So we have to change our thinking. And so we have to be a little more intentional about that. And one of the ways we can be more intentional about it is through the practice of gratitude, through serving others. And I feel like that's where the church kind of sets that up for us already in our practice, because it's laid out for us. But if we aren't being intentional about it, even though we have the tools, we're still hindered. So that in that way, working on ourselves, reflecting on ourselves. And that could actually have a ripple effect too. If I'm being more grateful, then, Mina's going to be like, wow, she's kind of got this more optimistic view on life, and I kind of see where that's going, and that he starts to practice it too. That feeds back into me, because now my community is better for it. If Mina now has this gratitude jar at home and somebody asks him about it, like, what's that? Oh, this is what what I'm thankful for, and little things, big things, and then that person, so on and so forth. Now his village is even better for it, and it feeds back into him again, that building one another up. So I feel like that's where that sense of focus, but I couldn't agree with you more, Abuna, that sometimes we become a little bit self-centered, and if I'm not reaping the benefits of that community, I want out. But at what point do you say, maybe this is not the community for me, I need a different community? I think that takes balance, because I have seen several communities where it can be built to, it was very conducive to an unhealthy spiritual and mental life. And knowing when I've seen people step out and have said that was the best thing for them, but they didn't step out to say, I'm not being in any community, I'm isolating myself completely, but they found a community in which they can flourish, in which they can do better in general. So having that balance between, when not to give up and keep pushing, but knowing when I need to kind of maybe step out, that's hard. to do, especially when you're in deep. So, what are your thoughts about that? I'm curious, actually,
Mina, what
because
do you think?
often we kind of tell, servants,
I
just
love
keep
that
going,
question.
stick in
I have,
there. You have to learn how to, serve with all kinds of people. But at what point should we say, hey, this is really not healthy for me? And I have some thoughts about it, but I'm curious to hear.
I have a lot of thoughts. I'm going to pass the mic to Mina.
I stopped taking the mic a long time ago.
What do you mean you stopped taking the mic? Go ahead. You have a mic in your mouth right now. I see it.
I do have a
You
mic
can't
in my,
avoid it.
in
None
my
of us have a
mouth.
microphone on the screen. Yours is visible right there.
That's true. So I guess I'll take the mic then if that's the.
Yeah.
I'll tell you some of my thoughts as you guys are speaking on this.
Yes.
I'll backtrack just for a second, Kathy. I'm going to get to that point. So what we've been talking about then in that last portion is then you talk about when the church talks about dying to yourself, right? When we talk about what does it mean to die to yourself, and we're saying you die to yourself while living for others. So you're living your life intentionally for other people, and through it, you're dying to yourself. But the point is ultimately is that through living for others, you do become fully alive yourself. Again, so it's this perpetual cycle where it starts where you don't expect it to go, but it goes to where you never really dreamed of it going there. But it starts by that little bit of pressure points, the dying to yourself. So I want to talk about vulnerability, but I'll come back to that point because that's part of dying to yourself, is part of going through that pain is being vulnerable. And I want to talk about that, but I'll come back to that to talk about where do you draw the line between what's too much. I think I have two thoughts. One is that you don't really, like, it's different from person to person. There might be the same exact situation. Two people would react to it differently. One would choose to leave and one would choose to stay, and it would both be correct. Because I feel like God gives people individual graces to deal with certain issues in their own ways. And that is usually like, you might be in a situation and it requires conscientiousness. Is that conscientiousness, like, one of the definitions could mean that you are in a situation where someone is taking advantage of you, but you know it and you're letting it go deliberately. You're not stupid. Like, you're not being conned. You're completely aware, but you're just letting it go. Just like one of your kids might come to you and be like, hey, I need $5 so I can go spend it on to go buy a sandwich, but they're going to use it to buy candy, and you know that very well, but you still give them the money anyways. Yeah. So I think if you are conscientious in a situation where you feel like God has given you or given me grace to deal with it and stay within that community, then the answer for me is I should stay. And if it's overbearing, I'm unable to deal with it, then maybe it's not for me. But it takes me to the second point of that, is how do I make that decision? I don't want to make that decision by myself. I'm speaking for me now, Mina. I want to rely on my nuclear group of friends, my nuclear community now, not the broader community, but my nuclear. There's like 5 or 6 guys.
Your close circle.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. There's like 5 or 6 people that I know that always have my best interest in mind, and are always looking out for me, and they don't judge me. They are people are in tune with their walks of God. They've tested God in their own individual lives, and I would like to cultivate my discernment through them. Like, what do you think about that? And what do you think of this? Do you think this is a situation where it makes sense to stay? And as they are great stewards of God and protective of me, they they, along with me and the Holy Spirit, can kind of figure something out together and test it. And if it doesn't work, test something else.
Mhm.
So that's a very long-winded answer to your very short question of like, how do you decide to walk away or to leave? But I think it is nuanced, but you do have to get discernment and you have to protect yourself at the same time.
And I love that because you said that nuclear friends, and that's a community, and that's an
Yeah.
authentic community, and that's not a community that just has your your interest in mind, but they're also the group that probably holds you accountable and wouldn't mind telling you the truth, even if it hurts at times, because they have your best interest in mind. It's for your salvation at the end of the day. And even Christ had that nuclear circle, right? And at some point says, who do you say that I am? Because that's what matters. It's like, who do you say? Everybody else is saying something, but who do you say I am? So what your nuclear circle says, I think it's important. And that's the community that I think could be most authentic, if built right, if built with that Christ-like mindset, I think can be very, very helpful. Yes.
That's an
Yeah,
interesting,
totally.
it's an interesting thing that I want to ask you, Mina, about that.
Mm.
So what makes those people
Mhm.
trustworthy? Because that's important, because if we're talking about community, and this is like the truest version of community are the people that you go to when you're in a moment of major, like there's obviously the larger community, and then there's like your smaller, like little village. I call them like my dream team. Like
Mhm.
these are the people that I go to when I have like a certain issue or a crisis at times, and I need to sort of navigate it. So what Mina are the things that you are looking for when you go to those people, and what are their characteristics, so to speak?
Well, that's a good question because it takes me to the point of vulnerability and to the point of being willing to take risks, because you have two routes. Like you have a choice to make one to go one of two ways. Either you risk becoming vulnerable and could potentially get hurt or reap the benefits of it, or risk nothing at all and gain none of the benefits. And if we've concluded that the benefit of community is salvation, and community is salvation, then it's worth taking every risk. But practically speaking, I think for me, how I've done it in the past is one, and I mean, I shouldn't be the one getting interviewed here. Kathy should be asking you these questions.
Now I'm
But
going to ask Kathy next, but
By all
yes,
means,
yes.
keep going.
because you were going in this.
Yes, and I love talking about this because, yeah, I can talk all day about this point in particular, because that nuclear group has carried me in like some of my happiest moments and the moments where I was most down, and that's my rock that is founded on Christ, but that is my rock. So I would say it came through time. You have to be patient. I had to test it. You start with small things, you trust with small things, and you discern. And some things don't seem right. Okay, this is maybe not a place where I would want to invest in. But I've seen friends who have constantly checked in on me for months when I didn't return their phone calls or return their texts. That's an interest in me. That's an interest in my friendship, in my community. That's not someone who wants something from me. You know, it's so easy to say, I called you once, it's your turn to call me back, and you chose not to call me back. Okay, like I'll see you when I see you. But for people to invest in you to a point, like, I'm not going to let you go until I figure out what's going on. You need to talk to me. I need to make sure you're okay. So trust over time with small things, and it builds into these like amazing things. And the second thing is that it's almost like the practice of medicine. People are in different disciplines and people are good at different things. There isn't one person that you go to for everything. They might be good to give you relationship advice, but they're not be great for career advice. And I think cultivating that small circle is important, just like you do go to different specialists when you have different ailments. What do you think, Kathy?
I agree with you 100%. I think that that's the recipe is trust over time, just testing it. It's not something you dive into from day one. It's something that builds over time. I think that's how you kind of guard yourself, guard others from that toxicity that ends up happening sometimes. And then you're too close, too fast, and you don't know how to get out. So those close companions that are in your innermost circle are the ones that definitely have stood that test of time. By the way, I think some of the most broken communities, the most judgmental of communities, the most critical of communities that can be hard to live in are the most broken and vulnerable. And I think sometimes it's their tactic to kind of defend themselves from anyone seeing all of that, is by projecting it on to other people. So if we can have that kind of compassion and say, this isn't about me, and it's kind of getting out of my own head and making it personal, say that, that person's behavior, that community's behavior, whatever it is, this is not about me. I can kind of step outside of that sometimes and say, okay, let me look at it from a different angle. And how can I be a healing presence in this situation? And I think it's hard. It's not for everyone. And it's certainly easier to go find a different church, a different community, a different circle of friends, a different whatever. But I think two things come to my mind. One of my favorite stories is the Samaritan woman. And she was just completely outcasted from her society to the point she has to go in the scorching heat, right, to get water. And that's where Christ met her. She didn't leave her community. She stayed there. But that's where she met Christ face to face. And I ask myself often, we can all relate to parts of her story, but one of the things I keep coming back to is, who am I in the village? Am I somebody who is pushing someone away and making them feel unwanted and that they don't belong here and that they have to hide to go get basic needs? Whatever that is, or am I someone who is promoting open arms and the love and mercy of Christ and showing that, there's place here, room for everybody. So I often, think of that story and who am I in the village as part of when I think of community. So I'm sure there's a lot of things that we can go with that, but I'll just stop here for a second.
That's beautiful. Yeah, and I love that story. So in a sense, we have examples of people who were vulnerable and open in bigger, larger communities, but that is not the norm. Essentially, what we are kind of saying is, it's safer to be vulnerable, but within smaller groups that you can cultivate trust with over time.
Yes.
You're not supposed to go take a microphone and just be vulnerable with the entire church on Sunday, as Abuna's giving out the blessings at the end of liturgy.
And I've seen people do it.
Yeah.
And it works in some communities.
I wish our community was ready for something like that.
Yeah, I don't think we are. Yeah.
I wish every community was ready for that.
Right. Yeah. And that's where I say, I think that's where we can see our vulnerability sometimes. Maybe we don't know what to do with it if it was to happen. Maybe we're afraid of what might unfold. We're not prepared for it. But I've seen communities have people come up front and just live out that testament of what Christ has done in their lives and who they were and who they are today because of him. And I don't think we're ready for that. I don't know that I'm ready for that. But.
Yeah. So don't start there. You might end up there, which is okay, but don't start there.
Well, I think it's contextualized, right? In some communities, they're capable of handling a situation like that because there's this recognition of we're a bunch of broken people and this is a hospital. And
Mhm.
if all of us are broken, we're all in a hospital, we share with each other our brokenness, that we can support each other and encourage each other to get healed and to be well. And
Right.
that, I think, is a very beautiful thing. But I think
Yeah.
there's a reason why the church moved from public confession to private confession, because the
Yes.
community wasn't able to handle the gravity of what people were confessing without judging one another, right?
Mhm.
The goal is to be able to be open with each other without there being judgment, without there being uh this frowning upon. Like, it's to glorify God's work in that person. Like, what did the Samaritan woman do? She went and told
Right. She went out and publicly confessed.
everybody all that
Yeah.
Christ had told her, right? Come see the man who's told me everything about myself. Like, come. And, they believed not because of her account, but because they saw it with their own eyes. They encountered him, right? So there is like this beauty of, come and see, come encounter, come enjoy the fullness of who God is. And when you do that, you'll start to discover yourself, because there is this like the saddest thing for me and the hardest thing for me is when people walk away from the church because of the people that are in it. And I heard somebody once say, if people leave the church, then we never had them to begin with. And that's a very interesting approach.
Yeah.
Because if the church is a hospital, actually, this was my sermon last Sunday. If the church is a hospital, then it doesn't really matter if there's sick people next to me. I'm coming to receive healing. There's a difference between the church and the community within the church. And I think that's a very important nuance, right? Many people walk away from Christianity totally and walk away from like the church because of the people that they've encountered within the church. But that's like
Yes.
cutting yourself from all healthcare because there's sick people in a hospital, right?
Right.
But that's foolish. You would never do that in a real life thing. But I can say, okay, this is a place where I come get healing from Christ himself. That's why it's all focused on him. And I have my community, my inner circle of people that I really trust, that are God-centered, that maybe are not the whole church, but they're a smaller circle. So it doesn't really matter if the church is inclusive or the church is kind or there's welcoming people there. I'm coming for Jesus and Jesus alone.
Yeah.
Obviously, the goal would be that I come encounter Christ and then I'm in really healthy community with all the people. But there is the real and there's the ideal.
Yes.
And the real is that anytime humans are part of any like, it's a divine human organism. So the divine, the eternal heavenly realm of the church is beautiful without spot or blemish, right? But the lived reality of humans within the church is broken oftentimes. So I
We
don't
obscure his goodness.
sorry.
We obscure his goodness. Like we.
Yeah. So there is like this, I don't know, there's like, it's really important because you go back to authenticity, go back to real community, go back to vulnerability, go back to all these, we talked about a lot in this conversation. But my whole thing that I really try to encourage our church and our community is, don't leave because of the person next to you, because you forsook the healing that was available to you from Jesus himself. Don't leave who God is and everything that comes with him for the sake of the person next to you, because you left like your source of life.
Yes.
That's my
Yeah, and it's quite a dilemma, because I mean, there's a saying, I think, I don't know if it's Saint Macarius or who, where he says, "No one walks into heaven alone." So the which enriches the idea, or essentializes the idea of how community ministering to it and being ministered by it are two sides of that same coin. Is that you go to receive healing, and you are used by God in the healing of others as well. And by you leaving, not only did you cut yourself off and impact your own healing, but you've also quite possibly impacted healing that others could have received by your presence. But then you say, okay, we can't do it alone. We got to do it in community, but the community is also broken because it's made up by broken people. But until they unify around Christ and be unanimous in that way, in what their goal is, not what their individual differences are, you really cannot tap into that. So go ahead, Father.
I'm wholeheartedly convinced that if a person is deeply embedded into the heart of Christ, it doesn't matter what the community looks like. Right? Like it doesn't, obviously it's really challenging. And I think it's like a grace thing, but I think somebody who's so filled with the Spirit of God can enter into any dark place and be a source of light. Now that's goals, right? That's like that's like
Ideal.
goals. Yeah. But I think
this is where that spirit of gratitude comes from, because if I walk into a community, if I walk outside, if I walk into the world and I'm only seeing the negatives, that's going to impact my behavior, right? Because this community is horrible, this community is toxic, all I see. But if we're all created in his image, and I cannot see one good thing in someone else, then the problem is me.
Totally.
Yeah, that's challenging. That's actually very challenging.
Yeah.
Which I think very few people want to hear. Right?
Yes, and I'm going to say that this is my experience personally. I've been in situations where I felt like, okay, seriously, I can't find one good thing. So I'm going to challenge myself to pick up on something positive from today instead of looking for the negatives, because I'm going to see what I'm looking for. If I have the intention to go looking in for problems, I'm going to find the problems. But if I go in looking for something that is positive, something that is empowering, something that is encouraging, uplifting, if I look for anything good, and again, I go, because as you said, Father Elijah, my focus is to meet Christ, then I will go find him in everything and everyone there. We're all created in his image, then there has to be something good, right? Yeah. And so when I find myself in that space where it's just all too much for me, I need some time apart from this, I have to be more intentional in challenging myself to find something great in somebody else or in that community or in that environment.
Yeah, and it's so true, because also you can't risk missing out on all the benefits. Because when Christ himself says in John 17, when he's speaking to the Father, and he says that for them to become one, just like you and I are one, that is an essential recipe for salvation. And if you are not willing to go through the sacrifices necessary and do what it takes to become one with those you might not like, then you might be also risking becoming one with God, because you might be vulnerable. Yeah, you need to be vulnerable as an individual, but you're not vulnerable as a community. Like there are strengths there are things that an individual brings to the community and blessings that the community brings to the individual. Like individual is vulnerable, but there's strength in community.
Absolutely.
The community can risk, like community without individuals risks extinction, but it's the individuals that protect the identity of the community. So it's like the fabric is integrated for them to be such a mutualistic beneficiaries of all the blessings that can come for the individual and for the community in being one are just purely essential. So if someone is listening to this, I'll give you two scenarios and you can both tell me. Someone is listening to this and the first scenario is considering leaving a community just because it hasn't served them. And the second scenario is someone who is looking for a community and hasn't found one. What should they do? If someone is listening to this, says, okay, all this sounds amazing. I want to find a Christ-like community. I want to grow into that. Where do I find an authentic community in the midst of broken people? What do you tell them?
Let me start with the first question. If someone is thinking to step away, I like the philosophy behind Matthew 18. If it's a particular person that you're having a conflict with or an issue with, go to that person directly. If it's, and if they're not hearing you, go with someone, and so on and so forth. But if they're still not hearing you, I would never push someone to something that is harmful for them. But I would say keep maybe a peaceful distance. Again, practicing gratitude and working on myself and focusing on just me going there to meet Christ and challenging myself to find out, something positive in everything. But while I'm doing that, I need to be at a peaceful distance so that I'm not sinning in the process because of my pain or hurt, or I'm being provoked in some sort of way. So if it means coming to church, and taking communion, greeting everyone hello quickly and leaving right away, start with that. If it means standing a little bit outside next time and kind of checking in on everyone, great. If it starts to grow, because again, the community changes us and the Holy Spirit works through all of us. And through that practice, if it starts to grow to the point where now you're serving in that community because you're getting a little bit more, hey, God is putting it on my heart to do so, great. But see where it leads you to. But you can always, like Mina, you said earlier, you start here and you can end there. You can start here at a peaceful distance and then kind of get closer as you heal. Just like if you've ever burned yourself cooking or baking, anywhere the heat, you're not even touching the direct fire, but anywhere that near the heat can be so sensitive and it's so painful that you can't just go directly near the fire right away, but you can be at that comfortable distance until it's healing, and then you kind of get closer. So that I would encourage that first. Looking for a community to belong in. That's a good question. I need to think about that a little bit.
Yeah, and that's definitely thank you for sharing on that first question, because it makes a lot of sense to start slow and do some checkups and checkpoints along the way, using people around you, or whether it's like social advice or people you trust, or maybe even professional advice from a psychiatrist or psychologist or a therapist, like to also help you maybe think through some of these things. A spiritual guide, as a father of confession, there's a lot of people that at your disposal, a great friend that you trust, to kind of discern these steps and go approach them slowly, so that it doesn't end up backfiring on you for the quote,
and to also know
sake
what's
of,
my role in this. What am I
right,
causing in this, right?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, the other question is definitely difficult, but I would say also there are some who already left, right? There are some people who have already left the community, and currently they don't belong in the community because they've been hurt by it for various reasons. How do we encourage them with the same philosophy to get back slowly?
Yeah, that's a little hard, because most people that leave the church, they're really hurt. At the core of it is a lot of pain and suffering, and I think it's a little hard for them to just come in to such a big community. But I think that's where the community can do some outreach, can individually, call and check on those, particular persons, instead of just saying, well, they never really belong to this community in the first place, or if it was so easy for them to walk away, they weren't really here for the right reasons. I think we can also try to do our part as part of the community to build that bridge and connect on a personal level, and maybe, meet them where they're at, and then meet them a little bit closer, and then kind of bring them in a little bit. If people are looking for a community, I think we live in a world where we just don't want to talk religion and spirituality. And so those are conversations that might not be happening in the workplace, or, in where we could have that impact. But I encourage people to, if they've never been to a church before, to come and just give it a try, and don't feel like you have to settle on one place. Maybe, St. Mina and Pope Corollas wasn't the place for you, but St. Mark was a better fit for me, and that's okay. And that's why I was saying, at what point do you tell someone that balance between sticking it out and going somewhere else? Because sometimes there's a better fit somewhere else where I feel a little bit more relatable. But if I find myself jumping from community to community and I'm never satisfied where I'm at, I would say that's a good point to say, well, hey, let me do some soul searching and kind of figure out what's going on here, that I can't be filled anywhere. Like, what is it that I'm looking for? But I encourage people to have those conversations at work. I have them at work, and they're not for everyone, but I like to, have those conversations at work and with people around me, and just check in on those around me. And if I've seen that someone's missing, or I haven't seen them in a while, to make that connection one-on-one and build those bridges. I think those are really important. That's the essence of community, and the authentic community, as we're talking about, really is that body and spirit of Christ. The spirit of the church is to, we love you and we want you to be part of us, and we're noticed that you're not here and you're missed, and we want to check on you. And I think that's that could be a very beautiful thing.
Totally. Yeah. It's amazing. And then the part about jumping from community to community, because a lot of people, it speaks to the point that a lot of people that leave are not necessarily hurt. There's definitely those who are hurt for the right reasons, and are those that just don't want to deal with the drama or deal with the issues or be part of healing. It's too much work. And I think discerning the two is crucial. Father Elijah.
Jesus loves you. Truly, like, man, if you are lacking community, if you have not given Jesus a try, there's like so much. There's so much. And maybe you have misconceptions about who God is. Go back to season 1, re-listen. Like, season 1 was all about misconceptions about God. Maybe you have a hurt from a specific experience in a community. Definitely, it's important to contextualize it and to, I wouldn't say go church shopping. I would say, pray and ask the Spirit to guide you. And if you're not a Christian, find a church that isn't focused on making you the center. Because if the church is focused on making you the center, then it's appealing to exactly what the world is trying to do, which is make everything focused on you. Find a church that makes God the center, makes God the central focus. Because if God is the central focus, it doesn't really matter what's going on around me. And yes, there are wounds that come from those experiences of being in churches that people have gossiped, people have talked, people have said stuff. But I'm telling you, if you take your eyes off of Jesus, that's what allows you to look right and left. That's when the storm hits and you start drowning because your eyes are off of him. And again, that's the ideal, right? The real is there's a lot of pain. And I think what Kathy said was really real. Like, take some time to kind of create a little bit of space, maybe come take communion, come to a church, go attend the service and leave right after. But we're not meant to be alone. I mean, I think that's the crux of this. Like, you can't do it alone. And I think people are finding community in gyms. People are finding community in social activities, but it's not real authentic community because it's not grounded in what will lead you to your forever place, you know? Or maybe it will lead you to your forever place, but not a place where you desperately long to be in. I don't know. I just think that we need to really reevaluate what we look at in terms of our community and our friendships. I think what Mina alluded to earlier about like his crew is really powerful. So I think I'll leave the question to our listeners, which is,
It's your crew too.
yeah, it's my crew too. You are my crew. Mina.
It's the same crew.
Yeah, you are my crew.
You're my
Mina.
crew.
I think I'll ask all of our listeners this question is, what does your community look like? Who are the people you surround yourself with? Who are the people that you are going to when you're in a situation that you're struggling with? And if they're people that you wouldn't trust to like walk your dog, I'm not sure they're people that you should trust in terms of your life situations. If they're people that you wouldn't trust with basic decisions in life, maybe it's time to like explore. And maybe that's the vulnerability piece. I need to go out and put myself out there a bit more to establish relationships wisely, systematically, and contextualize it. But I think authentic community will only happen in Jesus. And many people listening to this podcast may say that's very narrow-minded. But I think if you are searching for community outside of Jesus, it's only going to be grounded around an activity, not a relationship which will lead you to a peace which surpasses all understanding. I think that's the best way that I can put it. So if you're longing for peace, if you're longing for a place where you will always belong, a person that will always love you as you are and won't leave you as you are, then come to the Lord Jesus Christ. Come to him. And that's the preacher in me, that's the pastor in me, that's desperately longing for people to encounter Christ. And I'll leave you all with that.
Amen. Kathy, any last
That's
thoughts?
beautiful. There's nothing to say after that. No.
You have a lot to say after that, Kathy. Go ahead.
No, that was beautiful.
I'll give a shout out to, because the benefits of community, when you see it in people's lives, also like when you witness it in other people's lives, it's amazing. Like, I've seen so many in DC, San Marcos, DC, and my home church in Jersey, and so many other churches, so many other people that I've seen who have chosen the people, single people or couples, it doesn't matter. People have chosen the mundane, seemingly mundane route of community, showing up every Sunday, investing in people's lives, and going to graduations, and that the seemingly uninspiring things. I've witnessed some honestly amazing things. Like, I've seen, I don't want to mention anyone by name. I would love to be able to. I don't want to mention, but just seeing people have chosen to invest their lives in their community, in their local community, and seeing how many people have shown up to like their kids' baptisms, like their weddings, their events, or like when they are in pain or had a death in the family, or like just seeing the spirit of community that they fostered around them, that they have infused with love to the point that the community could not respond in any other way but show them love back so immensely. It is unbelievable. It is unbelievable to just see that level of love and care that people are willing to give each other. And I've witnessed it time and time. People who would not take credit for it, people who don't think that they're doing anything special. They don't have their own podcasts. They don't have any online platforms. But they are some of the most amazing people that have truly learned what an amazing sense of community can be fostered just by paying attention to your own surroundings and investing where you are. So I learned not to ever give unsolicited general advice to anyone. but if you are stuck in a boring service, same in and out, same Sunday in, Sunday out, seemingly the same, you are probably doing something right when you don't even know it. Just being part of these families and these kids and these adults and everyone that you touch on a daily basis, this is where real community is fostered. So big shout out to all the people I know that I would love to mention the names and I can't, and those that I don't know are fostering amazing communities like that. And that should serve as a sense of encouragement to all of us who would love to have that and invest in this specific way and for our own healings and our own self-restoration, because that's the only way forward. So thank you, Kathy, for being
Thanks
here
for
today
having
and having an amazing open conversation with us on this, sharing your insights and your experience. We love you and we care deeply for your friendship, and thank you so much for giving us of your time today.
blessing
and
is
if you're
mine.
listening,
Thank you.
thank you, Kathy. And if you're listening to this, Father Elijah would tell you, go find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Play, YouTube. Tell Alexa to play the Reintroduction podcast. We love you. We love to hear back from you. Send us some messages, give us some questions, thoughts, anything that's on your mind. We would love to be in communion with you as well. And with that, we'll leave you until the next episode. We love you and have a good night.
Right.